We have, we're just going to get a few people. We have a few, like a big group just signing on now. So we're just going to give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. I see President Dana is here, so that's great.
Patty, I just wanted to say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Elgin, hi, Jamie. It's good to see you. I wish it was in person.
Us too.
Enough, right? Absolutely. So I just wanted to say hello and welcome everybody. And I'm actually going to turn my video off also, but I just wanted to, again, give a little wave and welcome everyone. And looking forward to hearing all that you two have to share with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right,
Dana?
I'll see ya.
Dana,
Yes?
was that your fault or do you want me to call on you again in a little bit when we have
Oh,
more
no,
people?
that's fine. I'm here. I wanted to just say hello. But that's it. I think everybody heard me, so I'm good.
All right, there goes my whole script.
Oh, no, then call on me. That's fine.
I'm just
That's
kidding.
fine.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were or not, so I was keeping it informal. I wasn't sure what
It's all good.
you needed from me. Okay. Well, if you need me, I'll
It's
turn my
amazing
camera
I
right
actually
back
have
on.
a script.
Okay, then. All right. If you need me, just call on me.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll start with very kind of ease into it with a little housekeeping, and then we'll roll along. So just as a reminder, during the first part of our presentation here, everybody will be on mute with the exception of our presenters, and we would ask that you keep your video off as well. We are going to be recording this session, and typically we would end the recording of this presentation right after the PowerPoint presentation and before we went into questions and answers. But because we're going to be sharing this recording with, on the website for any of our units who may not have been able to join us tonight, I think some of the questions are going to be extremely relevant for our units going forward. So we are going to include the question and answer period as part of the recording for this particular presentation. So at this time, we have started the recording just to let everyone know that. You can put any questions for us at any time in the chat box. We will be monitoring it and then asking those questions on your behalf as we go along. But if there's something specific about your question that we need help with, we will ask you to unmute and join us in getting that question answered. You can also send your questions to our email address, chat@nyspta.org, and we are monitoring that throughout the presentation as well. So I want to officially welcome everybody to our presentation tonight. My name is Patty Frazier, and I am currently serving as the New York State PTA Treasurer. Also joining us tonight is New York State PTA President Dana Platon, who just jumped in with a little hello to everybody. And then assisting me in the chat, with the chat and the presentation tonight and the question and answers is Dana Welch from our New York State PTA office. She is our membership and insurance manager. She just gave everybody a wave.
Hi, Patty, it's Kyle. I just want to tell you I'm here. Hello. For some reason, I'm showing up as Michelle. I don't know why, but Michelle is here. I'm really Kyle. Ha, ha, ha.
Well, we see you as Kyle. So again, there goes my
good.
script. So also joining us is our Executive Director, Kyle. So thank you all for being here tonight. And I see that there's a lot of other leaders and unit people from across the state joining us. So it's wonderful. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our presenters and tonight. Both are joining us from AIM Insurance Company. First, I'd like to welcome Elgin Allen, who is the founder and CEO of AIM Insurance. He's passionate about people and continues to do everything he can to help volunteers have the best possible experience. Since 1989, AIM has been the industry leader in providing specialty insurance for PTAs across the country. So welcome, Elgin.
Thank you.
Maybe you can tell us how many states PTAs you're involved with.
Okay. Well, and as you said, we started insuring PTAs in 1989, which is about 31 years ago. And our home base is in Dallas, Texas. So the first parent teacher association we called on is the Texas Parent Teachers Association, and started insuring PTAs in 1989. And Today, we partner with 48 of the 50 state parent-teacher associations.
Excellent. Well, thank you on behalf of all of us. And then also joining us is Jamie Fagan, president of AIM Insurance. She leads the daily operations at AIM, including managing their growth strategy and seeking new ways to better serve their customers. And this certainly is a great way, and we really appreciate you being here with us tonight. So without further ado, we are going to turn the screen over to you, and
Okay.
Dana will you will be putting up your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Patty, can you see my screen?
Yes, it's very
Okay,
colorful.
Great, great. Well, hello to everyone in New York State tonight. Jamie and I are delighted to be here and visit with you about your insurance program. I'm going to start. The first slide is just to give you an overview of the package of insurance that every unit in the state of New York has. So the package includes general liability, commercial crime or bond insurance, and officers or directors and officers, as we call it D&O. So these are the three coverages that are included in a package that every unit in the state of New York has. And I'm gonna go through each one of these individually. So I'll start with the overview of the general liability coverage and talk about, how that protects you. The general liability is really simple. It protects you against lawsuits resulting from bodily injury and property damage. So if you're having an event and someone gets injured at the event, obviously that's bodily injury, so that would be covered under general liability. Or if during the event, let's say that the event is being held on school grounds, and if somehow some of the property at the school gets destroyed, again, then that falls under the general liability, and that the liability policy would step in to either to defend against a lawsuit for bodily injury or property damage. Your general liability also includes what we call medical payments. So the general liability, in addition to your liability limit, which is $1 million, you have, or $2 million, you have $5,000 worth of medical payments. And what this does is that your general liability, if somebody gets injured, the general liability policy will step in, and regardless of cause or regardless of fault, the policy will automatically pay out up to $5,000 to reimburse medical bills for an injury. And we feel like that this coverage, it's a part of your general liability, but we feel like it's really important because we find that if we can step in and take care of people's medical bills, then they're less likely to sue the PTA. So it's a small coverage, but really important part of the general liability. A really important part of the general liability is that your general liability protects not only your PTA members, but your volunteers and any employees, if you would or have any employees at the local PTA. This is really important because most general liability policies, if you went down the street and talked to a local agent about writing you a general liability policy, they would write you a general liability policy, but the policy would cover the named insured, and the named insured would be the XYZ PTA. So the PTA is covered, all the PTA assets are covered, but as we find, if there's a child gets hurt and there's a serious injury, the attorneys are not going to only name the PTA in a lawsuit, but they're going to name also any volunteers or any employees that were involved in that activity. So it's really important to know that not only the PTA is covered, but members and volunteers are covered by this policy if they're also named in a lawsuit, which means this policy is going to protect your individual 401ks, your CDs, savings, any equity that you have in your house. So this is really important, not only to the PTA, but also to its members and volunteers. As I mentioned, your policy, every PTA has a $2 million limit per occurrence. Per occurrence means per incident or per claim with no deductible. Next, I'm going to talk about the commercial crime or the bonding. Unfortunately, our most frequent claims used to be slips and falls that were people, they sprained an ankle or they broke a wrist, or kids were, jumping up and down a bounce house and bump their heads together, and they'd go to the doctor, go to the hospital, and incur $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 worth of medical bills, and most of those claims got covered under that $5,000 med pay limit. But unfortunately, today, our most frequent claims fall under this crime or this bond policy. So what does this policy do? The bond protects your PTA's cash money against embezzlement, robbery, or theft. Okay, so if someone who has access to your money takes it for their own personal use, that's embezzlement, it's covered. If the treasurer is going to the bank and is carjacked and robbed and the money disappears, then that's covered under robbery. If you have a lockbox in the administration building and somebody breaks in and steals the lockbox with money, that's theft, and that would be covered also. The money is protected from anyone in the PTA who handles or has access to money. Again, this is really important because typical insurance companies issue what is called a position bond. So they're insuring a position. So most organizations would insure the treasurer, that position, and they would name, Susan Smith as a treasurer, and they would insure that position, which is fine if the treasurer embezzles money, but if the president or fundraising chairman or anyone else embezzles money, there's no coverage, okay? But the policy that you have with us protects your money against anybody, and you don't have to name the position, you don't have to name the person. So whether it's a president or a treasurer, fundraising chairman, or even it's a volunteer at an event that's sitting at the door collecting money as people are coming into the event, that's also covered. So really important part of this coverage is that it's really broad. Your limit is $50,000 per incident or per claim with a $250 deductible. Okay, the next coverage I want to talk about in your package of coverages that you have is the directors and officers liability. So the general liability, it says general liability, directors and officers liability. So liability policies mean that they're protecting you from lawsuits. So the general liability protects you from lawsuits from bodily injury and property damage. So the directors and officers liability is protecting the officers from lawsuits resulting from wrongful acts. And I have some examples here. So if the officers are accused of misleading statements, negligent acts, discriminations, misrepresentation. So these are all things that an officer could be sued for, and they would be covered under this policy. Just real quickly, couple real life claim situations that I like to get people to kind of better understand this is, we had a situation where a PTA was having a monthly meeting. They thought a member that was going to be very disruptive would show up. They even thought this member might get physically disruptive. So they called the police, asked the police what should they do. The police said, no problem, we'll come. If this person starts to get out of hand, we'll just escort them out of the room. And that's what happened. And shortly after that, this person filed a lawsuit against the PTA and against the officers of the PTA, alleging that their civil rights had been violated. In other words, this person felt like that they had as much right to be at the meeting and voice their opinions as anyone else that was there, okay? So this was not a general liability claim because this person that was escorted out of the room wasn't roughed up by the police, wasn't injured by the police, so there was no bodily injury. So it's not a general liability claim. But this is a directors and officers claim because somebody took exception with a decision in this person's mind, a wrongful act that they took against this person. So it was a directors and officers claim. So, all of you are probably leaders, officers in your organization. So just know that every decision you make, everything you do, people can take exception to it, but it's covered under this policy. And the policy limit for this coverage is $5 million with a $25,000 deductible. And I know 25,000 compared to the $250 deductible under the bond sounds like a lot of money, but you know, if you were to get into a $5 million suit, you're going to think that $25,000 is pretty reasonable. Okay, the next thing I want to do is so I've talked about the 3 coverages that are in your package. The next thing I want to do is talk about some additional insurance coverages or some additional insurance options that we offer to local PTAs outside of the package that they have. Okay, so under the general liability, we have 2 endorsements. We have an endorsement called extended medical payments, and we have an endorsement called media liability. So when I say endorsement, what that means is you can add these coverages by endorsement to your general liability if you choose to do that. And then the other one is property insurance. And again, I'll go through and talk about all 3, the 2 endorsements and the separate property coverage. Okay, so first let's talk about the extended medical payment endorsement and what that is and what kind of protection that the coverage provides. Okay, so it provides easy access to reimbursement of out-of-pocket medical expenses due to injury sustained, you know, from an event that you have. So it's the extended medical does exactly the same thing that the $5,000 worth of coverage does under the general liability. Okay, and this coverage extends again, as we talked about, to both members, volunteers, and attendees. So why is medical payment coverage important? Because your general liability has $5,000 worth of medical payments that it'll make before it reaches its limit of $5,000. And as you know, if someone has to go to the hospital, $5,000 doesn't go very far. So this coverage allows you to increase the $5,000 worth of coverage you have in your general liability to $25,000 to $50,000 and to some higher limits if you think you need them. Okay, so again, as I mentioned about the $5,000, if you feel like you want to increase your limit here, that allows you to take care of more medical bills, and if you can take care of all the medical bills, then it tends to avoid lawsuits. So if you don't take this coverage, you've got $5,000 under your general liability policy. Someone goes to the hospital and then they run up $20,000 worth of medical bills, then there's probably going to be a lawsuit because you're only going to be able to reimburse $5,000 of the $20,000. Okay. The next endorsement under the general liability is media liability. And what does media liability protect you from? Again, it's media liability. So liability again indicates that this policy is protecting you from lawsuits resulting from social media. So what types of risks are protected? So if you post a photograph of a child or anyone without a release, someone could sue you over that, and that would be covered under this policy. Using trademarks or logos without permission, posting misrepresentation of information, and then making confidential information public on a website or on Facebook, basically on any sort of social media outlet. So this is what the media liability policy does. And then the last one I want to talk about tonight, that again is an optional coverage you can consider, is a property policy. And what does a property policy protect? Property policy protects any personal property owned by the PTA from loss or damage due to an accident, theft, or natural disaster. Natural disaster meaning, thunderstorms, windstorms, things like that. Okay, so again, it protects personal property. And we distinguish personal property from real property, being obviously anything attached to the ground, like a building, is real property. That's not covered under this policy. But personal property is basically anything you can pick up and move around. So things like fundraising merchandise, popcorn machines, tables, chairs, computers, raffle machines, any of these sort of things are, and then anything else that the PTA owns is covered under this policy. A lot of PTAs don't buy this policy from us. They don't consider that, they don't think they need this policy. And when they ask us what it covers, the first thing we do is ask them, are you buying fundraising merchandise? And in most cases, they say, yes, we buy fundraising merchandise. Well, one of the claims we had that unfortunately wasn't covered was a PTA bought $10,000 worth of wrapping paper to have a wrapping paper fundraiser. They were going to take the $10,000 worth of wrapping paper, sell it for 20, double their money. They took delivery of the paper on a Friday night. They had a portable building behind the administration building at the school. They put all the wrapping paper in the portable building. Overnight, there was a really bad thunderstorm. The portable building leaked, and most of the paper was ruined. They called us to file a claim. Unfortunately, they didn't have this policy. This policy cost about $100. They'd had this policy for $100. We would have written them a check for $10,000 to reimburse them for the paper they lost. So consequently, what happened was the fundraising vendor wasn't very sympathetic, still wanted their $10,000. So they bought additional $10,000 worth of paper. So now they had $20,000 invested in paper. They had their fundraiser. They raised $20,000. They took the entire $20,000 and they paid off both orders of wrapping paper. And they went through all that time and all that trouble and made $0. Okay. So again, for $100, this can be an important coverage. If you have school store supplies at the school, if you do a Secret Santa shop during Christmas at the school, there's a lot of merchandise there that can disappear or get run in the school because of fire or something else that's going on there. So it can be an important coverage. With that, I want to thank you for your support, tell you that we're here. Please email us. This is our email for our customer service department, or please call us on our 800 number. We learned very early in our relationship with PTAs that a lot of you do your PTA work at nights and on weekends. And so you can call us 24/7 and someone will answer the phone, whether it's on a evening like tonight or on a Saturday morning. So please take advantage of that, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Elgin, for that presentation, and Jamie for chiming in on some of our chat questions that came through already. But we're going to spend a little time now answering some of the questions that we've already received and some of the ones on the chat, if that's okay with both of you. I will, of course, any ones that are New York State PTA related, Dana and I will take care of, but we do have a couple that we wanted to ask you first. And I know this is probably the, if not $1 million question, $2 million question for our units here in New York State PTA. Our COVID restrictions are starting to ease up somewhat in various places across the state. So PTAs that have not been able to carry out their regular activities are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and are possibly starting to do some potential planning for some in-person events based on school district guidelines. So you had given us some great guidance early on with COVID, and we just wanted to touch base about what guidance you would offer our units that are starting to think about returning to some in-person events.
Jamie, you want to take that?
I'm happy to take that one. And I just saw another question that came up about COVID and a statement that AIM would not cover any in-person events due to COVID, which isn't true. There's an exclusion in the policy that says we don't cover, or the policy doesn't cover communicable diseases. So that's the flu, that's COVID, that's any communicable disease, and that is true. But we're still, covering your events the same as we have always been, and that's not really different. I'll just briefly touch on, a lot of, PTAs are asking about COVID, and, we haven't seen a single claim, someone asserting that, or, placing liability on a PTA event for gaining COVID. And I think that would be a very difficult claim. Could it happen? Yes, but I would be surprised if we saw it. And I think it would be a pretty difficult claim for someone to win, just the same as saying that they got the flu at your event. So anyway, there is still a great need for insurance. We're, advising PTAs, we never discourage events. We just, have from the get-go said, be sure and follow all your local guidelines. And so we're still, in that same boat. Just following your local guidelines really helps you alleviate liability. So if you're, as we talked about in the very beginning, when masks were required, social distancing, whatever the state was really requiring and enforcing, if you're going against that, you're creating liability for the PTA. And it's very easy for someone to say that that was negligent on the PTA's part. But if you're doing everything that's being recommended, and as the restrictions lift and, maybe masks are no longer required, things like that, you're going to have to navigate that. And I know we're all in a difficult time with trying to figure out how to do that. And we still definitely recommend that you go conservative on really, keeping masks alive and the more conservative approach to COVID. But the most important thing is that you are really adhering to the local standards, so nobody can, say that you were negligent and cause that, the liabilities on your PTA. So Patty, I don't know if I completely answered that question.
I think so. I think the second part of the question is about waivers. And so I know we cover, and just as a reminder, AIM has been very gracious in assisting us with creating a part of our resource guide, a separate chapter section on insurance. And so they do cover a lot of what we are talking about here tonight in the resource guide, which can be found on the state website. So we encourage everybody to check that out. As a follow-up to the COVID conversation, there has been some conversation about waivers. Like, can we ask people as almost like a security blanket type thing for us, if we are going to have an event, can we ask people to sign waivers to say that we can't be held responsible if somebody comes away and feels that they contracted COVID or any communicable disease at our event? Is a waiver have any weight?
What we always say about waivers is that they are a great deterrent from a lawsuit. So, between us, a waiver probably doesn't hold a lot of weight, COVID or non-COVID, but it, when someone signs a waiver and says, I'm accepting this liability, there's a mindset where they realize they've accepted that liability, and they're going to be a lot less likely to try to put that liability back on the PTA. So I would say the big value comes in that way, that someone recognizes that they took that liability. So when it comes time, if you have a claim and there's an attorney involved, the waiver probably doesn't hold a lot of weight, but we would still, encourage it and say that, if you, are comfortable doing COVID waivers, it's always a good deterrent from putting that liability back on the PTA.
Okay, so the questions are coming fast and furious. So I just want to read a statement, though, related to this COVID that was just put into the chat box. I just want to make sure that we are all in agreement on it. If the PTA adheres to guidelines, then AIM would cover it. Would AIM cover if someone got sick, if we adhere to guidelines? If they got sick through a communicable disease, the answer is
there's no coverage for any communicable disease. But that being said, it would be very difficult for someone to prove that the PTA was liable for them getting COVID. That would be very difficult.
Okay, thanks for
But
that.
if they did somehow prove that, if you were doing something really negligent, like there was a known person to have COVID, you invited them and didn't wear anyone's mask, and there was like an intent to get everyone there sick, and they could prove that you did that, there would not be any coverage under the policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No kissing booths as a fundraiser.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And so, Kate, I know you have put a question in the chat box. Do waivers hold any legal stance in New York? And I think we might have already answered that. So if you don't feel we answered the question, Kate, can you repeat the question in the box and we'll come back to it? But I just want to cover some of the other questions that have come up. So I just want to go back to the social media. So if we could just talk about that one more time, as far as just to confirm, in our regular policy, no additions, what we have for social media, or and then is the only option for social media to go to the optional add-on.
Yes, so the policy and the general liability policy that we offer is a standard form that's used in general liability policies across the nation, and it has an exclusion that you'll really, go to any other insurance agent, you'll find usually the same exclusion, which is for websites. So it doesn't say social media, it says bulletins and chat rooms and things like that. But yes, those things are excluded standard, and the only way to cover them would be to add the social media add-on. And I saw a couple of questions about pricing. I think that starts around, there's 4 limits that we offer from 25,000 to 100, and I think it ranges from around 70 to 150 in those limits annually.
Yeah, that is consistent with what we offered for 2020-21. It was $70 for $25,000. So in what you're experiencing with other states, any units even in New York State, is 25,000 a good starting point for these types of claims?
Yes, I do think it's a great starting point. We would advise you to choose a limit based on your activity. So depending, especially right now, since everybody's going more digital, how much activity are you doing on your website? How much information are you putting out on your website? How much posting are you doing? And I think there's a lot of units who do very little. So we would, consider if it's necessary for them at all. And then if they do, moderate activity, I would say 25,000 is great.
And then since we're talking about add-ons, we do have a quick question about the what we titled the terrorism policy. That is part of our regular standard policy that we have. And we are in the process of putting together our policies for the upcoming year, but it is my expectation that that would be included as in the past.
That's right. And I saw a comment about it used to be an optional coverage. And actually, we made a decision to include this in our package standard. So now the terrorism is an automatic inclusion. So you won't see that as an option anymore on the renewals.
Okay. And what exactly did that terrorism policy cover?
That's a great question. It covers certified acts of terrorism. So it really has to be certified by the U.S. government. I think the language says it has to be the Secretary General of the U.S. government. So at an event like 9/11 is what's going to be covered by the terrorism. And we actually refer to it as TRIA because that's the name of the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. So it has to be a classified, certified terrorist act.
Okay, thank you. And then we would like to get some clarification on the property policy. So again, I think we talked about 2 different kinds of property, the school property, and then also the policy that would be covered under the marine extra add-on optional policy. So again, property, if the PTA has an event on the school grounds and some damage happens to the school property while we're there, are we covered for that?
Yes.
Can I
So
use an example? If we have a dunk tank and it leaks all over the gym floor and ruins the gym floor, are we covered?
yes. So this is the difference between first party, which is yourself, your unit, your PTA, and third party, which is the liability. So under the general liability, that's a liability third party coverage, where the property, which we also call inland marine, that's a first party coverage. So that covers your PTA's belongings. So that's the difference between the property under general liability versus property. And the scenario that you just explained with the leaking all over the gym floor, that would be liability for the school. So, or liability for the PTA that needs to repay the school for the property damage. And that's already included in your current policy. The property add-on that we're talking about is just for, like Elgin was talking about, fundraising merchandise, or what we consider first party, your PTA's property.
So that would be like our cotton candy machine, our popcorn machine, other types of property like that. I mean, I think, you know, in some places there might be grills and that type of thing that people use on an annual basis. So again, for that kind of coverage for things that the PTA owns to use to do their PTA business or run their PTA events, we would say that the marine coverage is something that you might want to consider adding on. You have, again, just as a roundabout figure, this year was offered for $10,000, $115 was the add-on for our units for that. So
Patty, just maybe to help make this a little simpler, if it's property of someone else, like the school, if the property belongs to somebody else, it's covered under general liability. But if the property belongs to the PTA, it's only covered if the PTA has that property policy that we offer.
Okay. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And let's see, so we've talked a little bit, and we've had a couple of questions about this, and I think this is more of a New York State question that I'll answer, but I'm going to ask you to help me with it. So we've had a couple of people, you know, asking about, so this current year, 2020-21, you know, we sent out the policies and requested our premium payment to go along with the policy of $300. Is the base for a single unit. And that is the same as it was the previous year. But some of our units are feeling that, well, we had this insurance policy all year and we really didn't, you know, do anything to, you know, even maybe warrant having to have liability insurance. So now we're going to be actually starting to renew our policy for the upcoming year. Is there any way that we could offer a break in the premium because of the future policy based on the fact that we didn't take full advantage of our policy this year? So I'm just going to start out by saying that, you know, the insurance package that we offer, again, we feel that it is, you know, something that we've been able to keep as low as possible so that it is an attractive figure to all of our units. And then I just want to jump back to something that Elgin said. One of the things that all of our PTAs still had all year long were their funds. And because of the restrictions of COVID, our funds were probably more at risk than they normally would be, because we weren't having regular meetings. We weren't able to, have contact with each other. We were still asking units to do their reconciliations on a monthly basis, and take care of, funds, but we weren't able to actually see all the reports as we normally would, is our understanding from a lot of our units, and reconciliations were not always being able to be done as timely as possible. So again, Elgin, if you could just jump in a little bit and just kind of repeat again what you had told us, because the first time I heard this at a training, I was, really totally surprised by the trend of claims.
Yeah, Patty's exactly right. While a lot of your units have not been active with in-person events, your money is probably has been more at risk this last year than any other year. And we've seen a increase in bond claims from embezzlement. While you're not maybe as active in person as you've been in the past. You're still talking with each other. You're still making decisions. You're still running your PTA. There's still a chance for a directors and officers claim. A lot of PTAs have been having viral events where they've been doing programs where they're fundraisers, where they have physical activities via Zoom. And so that still creates some general liability exposure. So, so while you don't feel as active, there's still a lot of things going on that could cause you liability or cause you an insurance claim. And unfortunately, I've owned a home for 40 years and I've never filed a claim against my insurance. So I kind of feel like I should be getting it for free, but the insurance company doesn't see it that way.
So thank you for that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the advantage that we have as a state, doing it as a group policy. So we, come to you as one entity asking for coverage for our 1,400 or so units. Can you talk a little bit about that whole idea of how we, by adhering as best we can to the play, pause, and stop list and minimizing claims, how does that help us to keep our premiums to what they are?
Yeah. We look at New York State PTA as a whole. So every year when we go through renewal, we're not looking at, well, this PTA had a claim, and so they need to pay more than another PTA. We kind of underwrite this as one policy on a statewide basis. So the fewer claims you have, then that allows us to either renew the coverage at no increase, or renew the coverage at a very, very small increase. And so, as Patty said, if you can look at our risk management guide and look at the play, stop, and pause sheet and try to do the things you can do to keep from having a claim, then that goes a long way to keeping the rates down over a long period of time. And I have to tell you that the package that you have, because we look at you as a group and because you have 1,400 units, that buys you a huge discount. In a lot of the states that don't have packages or don't mandate coverage, and individuals are it's recommended to individual PTAs to buy it on their own, they're paying twice the premium that units are paying in New York.
And another good thing to note is, New York, state negotiates for the units every year. And so I should note that PTAs have cheaper or lower premiums than any other group. So we insure a lot of booster clubs and PTOs. And because of the organization of PTA, we offer lower premiums for PTAs as a whole. And then when we have states like New York, that is very involved at the state level, we offer a lot of further discounts because the state's so involved with, negotiating that package and designing it for the unit. So yes, any of our states that are involved, like New York, we typically can offer much greater discounts.
Thank you for that. And it was really great for us to be able to, based on our past history, be able to keep our premiums the same, but increase our liability this past year from $1 million to $2 million. So I think that, that's a testament to our units and to the great work that they're doing. So we should all be thanking each other for being able to have a strong policy with the premiums that they are. So one of the things that we wanted to talk a little bit about is additional insured. And I'm not sure, I'm going to ask this question, and you may tell me that might not be an additional insured, but we'll still talk about additional insured. So we have a unit that would like to distribute their fundraiser items that have come in at a community center rather than at the school, because the community center is more open to having people come in to pick up the fundraising items. Are we covered at the community center?
Yes.
Okay. And if we left if we had the fundraising things delivered to the community center on Friday, but we didn't start distributing till Saturday, if something happened from Friday to Saturday to those items, they would not be covered unless we had the optional marine coverage. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the same at school too. If something happened at the school too, if we left it there. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where the property is, whether it's at the school, it's at your home, it's at a community center, wherever it's located, if something happens to it, it's covered, if you have the property policy.
If you have okay. So we don't need an additional insured for that. When do we need an additional insured certificate?
I'm sure most of your districts are asking to be added as an additional insured. And that's just so everybody understands that coverage. That basically says that if you have an event at the school, the PTA has an event at the school, someone gets injured, an attorney gets involved, they sue the PTA, they sue the district, they sue anybody they can sue. There's a teacher involved, I don't know. That means that if it was your event, now your policy will extend to the district because you created liability for the district by having your event at the district or at the school. So if you would need an additional insured, you might be having an event at a different venue that's not on school property, or basically you're involving someone in your event and it's creating liability. We wouldn't really want to add a vendor for per se. If someone's running their own business, we want them to have their own liability insurance. You wouldn't want to extend your policy to a vendor, but someone like a school district or the county, things like that, you would extend your policy in case you create liability for them.
Yeah, and on the other hand, if we recommend or we encourage that when you use outside vendors, that you use vendors with insurance. So for example, if you've got a bounce house vendor, we recommend that you use a bounce house vendor that has insurance, and then ask them to list you on their policy as an additional insured. So that helps. If there's a claim or an accident because of something that the bounce house vendor did, then you're covered under their policy. Their policy will respond first.
Okay, so we're going to put parentheses around bounce house for New York State PTA, and we're gonna substitute that in with what somebody suggested was a magician.
Right.
So if you're having a magician, because we have all agreed that the bounce house, there's a certain amount of liability there that we're not asking our volunteers to take on. So we're going to say in New York State, bounce houses, we find that there's other ways that we're going to be able to entertain our students like a good magician. So thank you for that. Okay.
Did I say bounce house? I meant magician.
Thank you for that. So lots of questions here. So I want to just make sure I have, so again, the magician in person should have his own insurance. What if we are having a visiting author or a magician? We're all at home virtually watching that person conduct their entertainment, so to speak. Should we still be making sure they have insurance? I thought this was a great question.
Yes. You're saying if you basically it's a virtual event where there's a magician involved.
Right.
So it doesn't really seem like there would be any liability with that, but I'm gonna pivot to a yoga instructor, and I know that's a little bit different because they're instructing them something physical, but it's a perfect example of someone's trying to do a yoga pose at home, hurts themselves. There is liability. So that still exists even in a virtual event. So I can't offhand think about what a magician would do that someone would be injured, but they could be trying, they could try to replicate a trick and hurt themselves. And, what the outcome of that claim would be, I don't know, but they could definitely try to hold the PTA liable in a virtual event. So we still recommend that you follow your normal procedures, even with virtual events.
So what we're gonna do is, we want to hire a magician either in person or online, or the yoga, which is a perfect example because so many people are doing mental health presentations, and yoga is always part of it. So when we do that, we're going to ask them for some proof of insurance. What are we asking them for, and should they have a certain amount of insurance in order for us to contract with them?
You want to ask them for general liability. And I know we probably have someone who's thinking, well, what if they're just a sole proprietor, just an individual that's not really operating as a business? That's okay. And they're not going to have their own insurance probably. It just means that if they create liability for the PTA, that's going to come back on your policy. So you just want to be aware that you're taking that risk by hiring somebody without insurance. If you're hiring a business, a business that has magicians, 100%, they should have insurance. They shouldn't be operating as a business without it. I would just, I know that there are certain exceptions where you're hiring an individual, maybe even a parent who's done magician work in the past, and they're not going to have insurance. But definitely, if they're a company or a business, you want to be requiring general liability of $1 million.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to jump back to the additional insured, and I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this part of it. What is the process for getting the additional insured?
You can, I'm trying to think if you can go through our website and send a request through the website, or there's a form that we can make available to everybody. It's actually on our website as well, but we just need a form.
And in our resource guide. It is in our resource guide too.
Yeah, in the risk insurance guide. It's just a one-page form, and basically we require a signature because it does change your coverage, and it says you're willing to share your limit with the additional insured. So, if there was a really large claim and they found that the PTA was liable and also the additional insured, you would share your limit. So if it went beyond $1 million or whatever the policy limit is, that's just something you'd have to consider. So that's why we ask for a signature in a form, but it's pretty easy.
In the resource guide, we have the form available, and the instructions are right on the bottom to complete it and to fax it to AIM. And by the fax, you really mean fax. That's not something that we can scan and send to you?
You can scan it to us.
Okay, so the option is to scan as well, and we'll update that in the resource guide. Or you can print the form from your website. And I encourage everybody to visit your website because there's some great tips and other information on there that's very helpful to anybody that's operating as a PTA or other parent group. A lot of great information. And then also if you log in using your insurance policy number, you can fill out the form there and send it that way. So there are options to do the additional insured. Okay, so I just want to do a quick time check. It's about 8:24, so 8:25. So we only have a couple more minutes. I think we have covered a lot of the questions. Again, really fast. Will we be covered for a claim filed during a virtual event if someone gets hurt during the yoga? The answer is yes on that. What about food trucks? Any thoughts on food trucks? So again, we invite a food truck into our school. They're going to be in the parking lot, and anybody's welcome to go up and shop and buy food. Do we need to do anything for that?
You want to make sure they have insurance. Make sure they have general liability insurance, because you definitely, there's even more risks. Something could overheat in the kitchen, or someone could get ill. There's a variety of things that could happen with food trucks. So you definitely want them to have their own general liability insurance.
Okay, great. So I just want to cover one issue that is actually a New York State issue, a question that was brought up. So we talked a little bit earlier about the premiums. So we have the policy and the premium. So it's like a two-part process. So in a couple of weeks, probably mid-April or so, the policy will be coming to the current president via email with all the forms to fill out and all the instructions, both for the the insurance, the New York State PTA insurance package, and anything else you want to add on to it. And then what happens is the unit reviews the paperwork, the president signs off on it, and they return it to AIM with the premium check. So in New York State, though, what we do offer is, and if there is a unit that is stressed, we do have a waiver procedure in place. This is something that if you are a unit leader that for whatever reason you don't feel that your unit can include the premium with your signed policy, please contact your region director to find out if you would be eligible under the procedure for a waiver. It's very important at this point in time. We want to try to get everybody's insurance as usual paid by June 1st. That's what you need to stay in good standing as a unit. But it's most important if you are stressed in any way as a unit that you make sure that you're in contact with your region director for assistance. I wanted to add something to that and already I forgot what it was. So one thing about a waiver is the waiver is only for the premium. The waiver is not for the paperwork. So regardless of anything else, we need to have all of the complete paperwork signed and sent to AIM to make sure that your coverage is uninterrupted. So for instance, our current coverage will end on June 30th. If we don't submit our paperwork as a unit to AIM till August 1st, and something that happened in July, we are not covered. Is that correct? So we don't want to have any lapse in coverage. So we want to get that paperwork in, and if a waiver is needed, we want to get that process started. So please do not wait. If that's something that you know of right at this moment, that and at this point, $300 is there are no increases in our part of the insurance program. So the basic New York State PTA insurance program will stay the same. But if you feel like there's any stress, please get in touch with your region director as soon as possible. Your new certificates for the year will come after on or about July 1st. So we don't send it out prior to July 1st. Is that correct? Or
That's correct.
okay, so that's that.
And I think, Patty, this is Dana. I think this year may be a change. I'm not sure what we did last year, but we are going to email those certificates. We were talking about that, Jamie, to rather than sending them in the mail, because we don't want them to, we want to get them to the right person in the quickest way possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then I have just another question that has come up regarding, again, not really inspired by the lapse of coverage. So if we are a PTA and it is September and we realize now that when we see our audit for ending the year, ending June 30th, that we had a problem, like what is our time frame to report a problem that's related to our funds, theft, fraud, loss of funds? Is there like a limit of how long we can go before we file a claim?
I don't believe there's any limit in the policy language. The policy does require that you are signing off on your bank statements monthly and that you're doing an annual review. So as long as you're doing those things and you can show proof that you've done those things, when you discover it is not a big issue. You just want to be sure that when you do discover it, you try to make the claim as soon as possible, just because it helps the details of the claim and we can get it paid in full and faster.
And is there an aspect of reporting, if we have a loss of funds, is there an aspect about reporting it to our local authorities?
Yes, you do need to file a police report if you feel there's been an embezzlement or a theft.
Okay, and just as an aside, so when you do have this situation happen, I do again urge everybody to contact your region director to let them know that this situation may or may not be as it seems, but because when you do go to the authorities, there is a good chance that they're going to ask you what you think happened. They're going to ask you that, and they're going to ask you for names. And so you want to really be fully prepared when you do go to speak with your local authorities. They're usually very kind and very helpful, but I mean, it does kind of create a little bit of anxiety sometimes. Okay, well, I think we have covered quite a bit of all of this, and I think, let's see, I think we have reached the end of our questions. I'm going to do a fast look again. We answered the question, does a volunteer need to be a paid member to be covered with our liability? The answer of that is no. And I think we covered everything else. So I really want to say thank you. We will continue to take questions at any time. Questions can go to your region director, to Dana Welch in the state office is another option, and also to AIM directly. So again, they are very helpful either by email or their 800 number. As Elgin pointed out earlier, they're available 24/7, which is great. So I'm just going to reach to you, Jamie, and see if you have any closing remarks that you would like to share with us.
Two quick things. I just want to remind everybody who, I know a lot of you have been with us for a long time, but if you're new to us, we have an entire team of people built around helping PTAs. So if you get into a situation and none of these things, you recall none of this information, don't hesitate to call us. We literally, this is what we do all day long, is talk to PTAs, help you file a claim, help you determine whether you have coverage or you don't. So don't hesitate to call us anytime. Look us up on the website. You can email us, whatever. I did see one other question in the chat that I did want to address really quick. Somebody asked a question about scammers. We're seeing this a lot where someone sends an email disguised as the president with a slightly different email address, and money is transferred. Our crime policy covers this. So we just, I think it's a wonderful coverage, and it's been happening with greater frequency. So just another reason why having coverage during COVID when we're less active has become really important.
So the crime, that would still be the $250 deductible.
That's right.
So again, if the person sent $200, there's no claim needed. So in those situations, again, I think that's important that units still let your region director know. If you need guidance, your region director will be able to help you with guidance on that. But again, that is something that if it's under the $250 and a claim can't be made, that is something that it's an executive committee decision on how you will handle reimbursing the person who inadvertently was scammed. And I did miss one other question, Jamie, and I'm sorry. I do want to answer this one. So most of our schools have that, where we have to sign off on a photo release whether or not our child is able to be photographed for any media, social media, school publications, and what. Can we use that as a PTA for so in other words, if the school says they can't be photographed, we just follow along with what they have? Or should we have a separate photo waiver for just PTA, for parents at PTA?
Technically speaking, the waiver follows the organization. So, an attorney would tell you, you need to have one for the PTA. I think it's helpful that the school has a waiver and you say, well, we follow the school's waiver, and they've signed off on, the parent has signed off on that liability, but technically speaking, you should probably have your own. It holds a little bit more weight.
And again, I encourage every unit to have some kind of procedure or at least guideline in place for your chair people or whoever's going around taking pictures at your events, to let them know that you don't want any children's pictures, or you have to have the parents sign a form right away. I took your picture, I took your child's picture. Have some kind of procedure. And again, your region directors can be an assistance on that. Okay, Elgin. Anything you want to share with us before you go?
I think Jamie summed it up pretty well. We just appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and do what we can do to help PTAs in New York State.
Well, thank you. First of all, we want to thank you as well, New York State PTA. You have been an incredible partner to us, not only with our insurance, but being an alliance partner at many of our events, and sponsoring different and various parts of our events, T-shirts and other of our workshops. So we can't thank you enough for that, and we certainly thank you for your time tonight. We hope everything is well in Texas. We know that you've been through some tough times, but we hope that you and your families are well. And as many people are saying in the chat box, we really look forward to seeing you again in person.
Us too.
Yes, us too.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, I remind you to, just keep sending us your questions, even if it's not related to insurance, to chat@nyspta.org or directly to your region directors. So thank you all very much for your time tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on our future trainings.
Hi, guys.